The scout dog stopped, and the men behind him had no idea why. A few seconds earlier, he had been working the trail the way he was supposed to, out in front with his handler, moving far enough ahead to catch something before the rest of the patrol walked into it. Then, the rhythm changed. The dog stopped. The leash went slack. His attention shifted away from the trail. To the men farther back, the ground still looked like the same ground. The brush still looked like the same brush. There was no man standing in the open, no obvious wire across the path, no sign that said stop here. But the handler knew one thing right away. Something had changed. And once the dog had told him that, simply walking forward was no longer the safe choice. That was the strange position a scout dog could put an infantry patrol in Vietnam. The dog could warn you before you understood what he was warning you about. He could take away the easiest option without giving you a clean replacement. You still had a mission. You still had men behind you. You still had ground that had to be crossed. But now the ground in front of you was different. Not because anybody could see it. Because the dog could. That distinction mattered. Scout dogs were trained to give silent alerts. But there was no single motion that every dog used. One might stiffen. Another might raise the hair along his back. One could change the way he carried his ears. A handler might feel the leash change before he saw anything at all. The Army understood that the signal could be different from dog to dog, which meant the handler's real job was not just holding a leash. He had to know his particular dog well enough to recognize when ordinary work stopped being ordinary. That sounds simple, until you think about what the handler had to do with that information. A dog did not point at a map and tell you what was ahead. He did not say there were 3 men behind a tree, or a concealed position 20 yards off the trail, or a cache under the ground. He could alert on unfamiliar human scent, on something hidden, on something that did not belong there. The stronger the find, the stronger the alert might become. But the dog was not giving the patrol a report. He was giving them a problem. The handler now had to pass that warning back without turning the front of the column into noise and confusion. The point element had to slow or stop. Men had to look where they had already looked and admit that their eyes might not be enough. The patrol leader had to decide whether the warning meant investigate, change direction, spread out, wait, or keep moving by another route. And every one of those choices cost something. That is what made the dog useful. He did not make the jungle safe. He changed the patrol's decisions before the jungle made the decision for them. One of the best documented examples comes from the 1st Infantry Division. Sergeant Jonnie D. Foster and his scout dog Duke were working as point men for Company A, 1st Battalion, 28th Infantry. The Army's own account is careful about what it says. It does not give us a movie scene. It does not tell us exactly how Duke's ears moved or what Foster felt through the leash. What it does say is more important. Duke alerted the company in time to keep the men from simply walking into an enemy ambush. That changed the next minute for everybody behind him. The company commander, First Lieutenant Anthony F. Romans, had time to get his soldiers into defensive positions before contact came. Later, Foster and Duke were singled out in a letter of commendation for the proficiency of the scout dog team. Think about how small the first change must have looked compared with what followed. A dog working ahead. A handler seeing something in that dog that the rest of the patrol could not see. A warning passed back. Men changing what they were doing. Then contact. That is the whole job in miniature. The important part is not that Duke somehow knew the complete situation. He did not. The important part is that Foster trusted a change he had learned to recognize before there was visual proof for the men behind him. That trust had to be professional, because blind trust could be just as dangerous as ignoring the dog. Scout dogs were not machines. Heat mattered, wind mattered, terrain mattered, water could affect scent. Other people moving through an area mattered. The patrol itself carried smells, noise, equipment, sweat, mud, food, smoke, and everything else that came with men moving through the field. The dog had to work inside all of that, and the handler had to read him without pretending every hesitation meant an ambush. So when a dog stopped, the real question was not, "Is he right?" It was, "What exactly is he telling me, and what can we safely do with it?" That is a much harder question. The patrol still had to move. If they stayed frozen every time the dog showed interest in something, they could lose time, lose the route, or fail the mission. If they pushed ahead too quickly, they could throw away the one advantage the team had just given them. The handler was standing between those two mistakes, and he was doing it with information nobody else could fully verify yet. That is where the relationship between handler and dog becomes more interesting than the usual story about loyalty. Loyalty was there, of course. Men cared about their dogs. Some handlers later described them in the language you would expect from men who had lived and worked with the same animal every day. But in the field, the bond had a practical shape. It was pace, pressure on the leash, where the dog's head went, whether he kept searching or suddenly locked onto one direction, whether a behavior belonged to that dog when he was working normally or only showed up when something was wrong. The Army trained the team, but the handler had to learn the individual. That mattered because two scout dogs could warn in completely different ways. A 1969 account from the 1st Infantry Division described one dog whose hair stood up along his back when he alerted. Another was known for changing the position of his ears. Another reacted so strongly that he rose onto his hind legs. You could not hand a new man the leash in the middle of a patrol and expect him to understand all of that immediately. The equipment was the dog. The interpreter was the handler. And the patrol was betting that the two of them understood each other. Now take that back to the trail. The dog has stopped. The first option is gone. The patrol cannot treat the route ahead as ordinary anymore. So somebody has to make the next choice. One possibility is to investigate the immediate area, but that creates a new problem. The moment you start searching, you are spending time in the exact place the dog has told you may be dangerous. You may have to move men off the trail. You may expose the patrol's position. You may find nothing, which still does not prove the dog was wrong. Another possibility is to go around. That sounds safer until you remember what going around means in country where the route itself may be the only ground anybody has looked at closely. A detour can put the patrol into thicker vegetation, softer ground, a ditch, a hedgerow, a stream bank, or another piece of terrain nobody planned to use. The dog solved one problem by taking away the route, and now the patrol has to enter ground with less information. This is the point where the title of this story really begins to matter. The dog stopped. The patrol still had to move. The alert did not end the mission. It changed the mission from moving through a place to figuring out how to move through a place that could no longer be trusted. That was the second problem, and it could be worse than the first one. The value of the dog was not that he always gave the patrol a clean answer. It was that he could force the patrol to ask the right question early enough to still have choices. That is also why the men behind the handler mattered. A scout dog team did not operate in some separate world. The handler could read the dog, but the patrol leader owned the larger decision. The men immediately behind the team had to react without crowding the front. The rest of the patrol had to understand that a pause at point was not dead time. Something was being decided up there. Veterans who worked with dog teams often remembered that difference. When the dog changed, everybody's movement changed with him. A rifleman several places back might never smell what the dog smelled. He might never see the hidden position until much later. But he understood the practical meaning of the stop. Do not walk into the space the dog has just questioned. That could be a very hard discipline to maintain, because infantry movement has its own momentum. Once a column is moving, every man is watching the man ahead. The spacing, the ground at his feet, the brush to either side, the load he is carrying, and the thousand small things that make up a patrol. A stop travels backward unevenly. One man stops. The man behind him closes the distance. Another man has not yet seen why the line has compressed. At the front, meanwhile, the handler is still watching one animal. That is the picture I keep coming back to. Not because it is dramatic, but because it is so ordinary. A man looking at a dog, a patrol looking at the man, and nobody looking at the threat yet. The dog had made the invisible part of the ground matter. Sometimes the warning led to an enemy position. Sometimes it led to a cache, a concealed opening, a tripwire, or some other hazard. Sometimes the patrol checked and did not get the neat answer that a later history book would want. That uncertainty was part of the job. The Army's own 1969 description of scout dog operations makes that clear. When a dog gave an alert, the area was checked for personnel, mines, and booby traps. The dog could not necessarily distinguish one category from another. He was telling the men that something was there. The humans still had to figure out what kind of problem it was. That makes the Foster and Duke incident easier to understand. Duke's alert did not win a fight by itself. It gave Romans and the men of A Company time to stop moving as if the next piece of ground were empty. Time to change posture. Time to prepare for contact instead of discovering it from the wrong position. That is a more useful way to talk about what these dogs did than calling them heroes and leaving it there. The dog changed the timing. In an ambush, timing is the whole shape of the event. Who sees whom first? Who is moving? Who is set? Who has to react? Who still has options? A scout dog could not guarantee the patrol would be safe. Nothing could do that. But if the dog shifted the warning by even a short amount of time, the men behind him were no longer entering the same situation. And that is where the handler's burden became easy to miss. If the dog alerted and the patrol found something, everybody understood why the stop mattered. If the dog alerted and the patrol found nothing, the handler still had to take the next step with the same animal. He could not punish the dog for giving information he did not understand. He could not start ignoring a signal because the last search had been inconclusive. He had to keep reading the dog in front of men who were tired, hot, carrying weight, and trying to get somewhere. The dog had to keep working too. That is a very different kind of pressure from the way these stories are usually told. There is no magic nose solving the jungle. There is a working animal giving incomplete information to a young soldier who has to decide when that information is important enough to change what everybody else is doing. And then there is the patrol leader who has to turn that warning into movement. That is why the team worked best when the dog was not treated like a mascot, and the handler was not treated like a man who happened to bring a dog along. They were the point. They were out there because the patrol's eyes had limits. The dog gave the unit another sense. But another sense is useful only if somebody knows how to interpret it. There is another detail from the Army record that tells you how seriously that interpretation was taken. Before teams went into tactical work, handlers trained with their dogs through field problems designed around the kinds of ground and situations they could face. Once in Vietnam, teams went through more acclimation and local training. The point was not to create a dog that performed tricks. It was to get the pair working well enough that the handler could recognize the animal's behavior under field conditions. That helps explain why a small change on the leash could carry so much weight. It was not a guess made by a man who liked dogs. It was the output of a working team, and the rest of the patrol had to decide what to do with it. This is where I think men who actually walked behind these teams can tell us something the paperwork cannot. If you were on patrol with a scout dog in Vietnam, what did you watch for when the dog hit scent? Did your handler raise a hand? Did the whole column freeze? Did the dog have one behavior everybody learned to recognize, even if only the handler really understood it? Put that in the comments, if you are willing. Not the polished version. Just what you remember the dog doing, and what the men behind him did next. Those small details are exactly the kind that disappear first. And if this is the part of Vietnam you want this channel to keep documenting, the jobs, the routines, the things a man noticed because his life depended on noticing them, subscribe. There are a lot of these stories still sitting between the official record and the people who were actually there. For the handler, though, the story always came back to the next few yards. The patrol could not stay where it was forever. Once the warning had been passed, and the immediate ground had been checked as far as the situation allowed, movement had to begin again. Maybe it went around. Maybe it continued more carefully. Maybe the formation changed. Maybe the patrol leader decided the mission itself had to change because the route no longer made sense. But the dog had already altered the patrol before anybody knew exactly what was ahead. That is the part worth remembering. The warning came before certainty. Foster and Duke's company got the clearest possible version of that lesson. The dog alerted. The men did not keep walking as if nothing had happened. They had time to take defensive positions. Then the enemy contact came. The official record does not need to tell us what Duke looked like in that instant for the consequence to be visible. Before the alert, the company was moving toward an ambush. After the alert, the company was waiting for it. Same men, same ground, same enemy ahead. One small change at the front of the patrol had changed what every man behind the dog was able to do. The scout dog stopped, and because the patrol stopped with him, they were still able to move when it mattered.